The silence in the ballroom was so thick you could hear the air conditioning hum. My best man, Dave, was staring at me with a glassy, drunken grin, his hand trembling on the microphone. My wife, well, the woman I had married exactly 42 minutes prior, was a shade of white that matched her Vera Wang gown. Her bouquet had hit the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a punch. I didn't even stand up. Instead, I reached into my tuxedo jacket, pulled out my phone, and hit send on an email I had drafted 3 weeks ago. That single tap triggered the immediate liquidation of our joint down payment fund, revoked the lease on our new luxury apartment, and sent a formal notice of fraudulent inducement to her father's legal team. As the first guests began to gasp, I leaned into the microphone at the head table and said 5 words that would ruin Dave's career and my wife's social standing forever. Room 402 has excellent acoustics, Dave. I walked out of my own wedding alone, $150,000 richer than I was when I woke up that morning, and ready to watch their lives burn from the comfort of a first-class seat to Bora Bora. To understand how I became the vengeful groom of 2026, you have to understand the players. I'm a contract negotiator. My entire life is built on contractual literacy, the ability to see the fine print that everyone else ignores. My fiancée, Sarah, was a high-value influencer strategist. She was beautiful, calculated, and obsessed with the aesthetic of a perfect life. My best man, Dave, we'd been friends since we were 10. He was the fun one, the guy who'd give you the shirt off his back, but apparently only if he'd already spent the night in your fiancée's bed. The betrayal didn't start at the wedding. It started last June. Sarah told me she was going on a wellness retreat in Sedona to clear her head before the wedding stress kicked in. She even sent me photos of red rocks and green smoothies. Dave told me he was pulling double shifts at the firm. In reality, they were at a boutique hotel in Scottsdale. I didn't know it then. I was the provider. I was working 14-hour days to fund a $200,000 wedding that was supposed to be the event of the year. I remember the night she came back. She smelled like expensive bourbon and guilt. She hugged me longer than usual. At the time, I thought it was love. Now I know it was the narcissistic relief of having successfully deceived the person who trusted her most. "You're so good to me, Mark," she'd whispered. "I know." And that was the first time I felt the itch, the feeling that the person in front of me was a character, not a partner. The discovery happened because of a glitch. In 2026, everything is connected. I was auditing our shared cloud storage to move some wedding vendor contracts. I saw a folder labeled Work Drafts Shared. Inside wasn't a marketing deck. It was a video file. I watched it. It was 10 seconds of Dave laughing, holding a room key, and saying, "Mark thinks we're at a retreat, Sarah. He's literally paying for the room while we're in it." Then I saw the door. Room 402. The room went cold. My heart didn't break. It went into cold state processing. That's a term we use in high-stakes negotiations when the emotional cost of a deal becomes too high to ignore. I felt the isolation of a man who realized his entire social circle was a lie. If Dave knew and Sarah knew, who else knew? I checked the guest list, our mutual friends, my bridesmaids, the likes on her fake Sedona photos. They were all in on it. I was the bystander in my own life. I had two choices. I could confront her and cancel the wedding, losing my deposits and becoming the jilted loser in her narrative. Or I could lean into shadow work. I could play the part of the happy groom while I built a cage for both of them. I chose the cage. For the next 3 weeks, I was a ghost in my own house. This is where I applied the paper trail protocol. 1. Financial decoupling. I couldn't just move the money. That looks like theft in a divorce. Instead, I reallocated our wedding fund into a series of non-refundable consultation fees for a business I was starting. A business Sarah had signed a spousal support waiver for months ago because she didn't want to be liable for my startup risks. 2. The moral trap. I invited Dave over for drinks. I recorded the conversation. I kept steering the topic to honesty. I watched him look me in the eye and toast to brotherhood. Every time he lied, it added a 0 to the emotional settlement I was going to extract. 3. The legal framework. I realized that if we actually got married, she'd have a claim to my assets. But if the marriage was entered into under fraudulent inducement, I could seek an annulment and damages for the wedding costs. I spent my bachelor party with a private investigator and a forensic accountant. We tracked the credit card swipes. I found the receipt for room 402, paid for with my emergency card. The plan was set. I wouldn't stop the wedding. I would let her say, "I do." I would let her sign the marriage license, because the moment she signed that document, she committed a breach of contract that I could use to dismantle her life. And then came the wedding morning. I stood at the altar. I looked at Dave, my best man, holding the ring. He winked at me. "You're a lucky man, Mark," he whispered. "You have no idea," I replied. The vows were exchanged. The I do's were said. We walked down the aisle to a standing ovation. We were officially, legally married for exactly 20 minutes before the reception started. And then Dave stood up for his toast.
Dave was drunk. Not funny drunk, but arrogant drunk. The kind of drunk where a secret feels like a trophy you have to show off. Dave and we've been through everything. Dave started, swaying. We've shared clothes, we've shared cars, and sometimes we even share the best secrets. Remember last summer, Sarah? That retreat? He laughed. A few people in the front row chuckled nervously. Sarah's hand froze on her wine glass. We were in Scottsdale, Dave continued, his voice dropping an octave, leaning toward the mic. Room 402. Best weekend of my life. Mark, buddy, thanks for the room service. You really are the best provider a guy and a girl could ask for. The room went silent, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Sarah turned to me, her mouth opening to start the gaslighting cycle. She was going to say he was joking. She was going to say he was just too drunk. I didn't give her the chance. I stood up. I didn't look at her. I looked at the crowd. I looked at her parents, who had bragged about this merger of families for a year. I know, I said, my voice perfectly calm. I've known for 3 weeks. I have the receipts, I have the video, and as of 30 seconds ago, I have the confirmation that the annulment papers have been filed on the grounds of fraud. I turned to Dave. The room service you enjoyed, I've billed it to your firm as an unauthorized expense. I'm sure your partners will love discussing your ethics on Monday. I looked at Sarah. The house is gone, the car is gone, and the influencer life you love? My lawyer is currently sending the Scottsdale footage to your primary sponsors. I believe they have a morality clause in your contract, don't they? I picked up my glass. To room 402, the most expensive room you'll ever regret. I drank champagne. It was perfectly chilled. I walked out. Behind me, the screaming started, but I was already at the valet. The aftermath was a bloodbath of litigation and social media fallout, but the real story isn't revenge. It's the psychology of how they thought they could get away with it. If you want to know the 3 psychological red flags I missed and the paper trail protocol you can use to protect your own assets from a betrayal like this, the viral moment was over, but the actual win happened in the quiet months that followed. Revenge is a sprint, but recovery and protection is a marathon.
To truly win, you don't just need to leave.
You need to understand the mechanics of the person you are leaving. Let's break down the core pillars of this betrayal: psychological analysis, narcissistic injury, and the bystander effect. Why did Dave do it? Why do it at the wedding? In psychology, we call this narcissistic injury. Dave didn't just want Sarah, he wanted to best me. By sleeping with my fiancée on my dime, he felt a sense of grandiosity. When he got drunk at the wedding, his filter dropped, and his need for supply, the need to be seen as the most powerful or in-the-know person in the room, overrode his survival instinct. On the other side, we have the bystander effect within the friend group. Many of our friends knew. They didn't tell me because they didn't want to break the social harmony. They prioritized their comfort over my reality. Key takeaway? If you suspect a betrayal, stop looking for proof from friends. Start looking for deviations in your partner's behavior. Tactical advice: the paper trail protocol. If you find yourself in a high-stakes betrayal, emotions will want you to scream. Logic will make you stay quiet. Here are the 3 steps I took that ensured I didn't just leave, but I left whole. Step 1. Establishing contractual literacy. Before I confronted them, I audited every document Sarah and I had signed. Because she wanted to be an independent brand, she had insisted on a very strict prenuptial agreement regarding our separate business assets. By hiring her as a consultant for my startup and paying her from our joint fund, I turned that fund into a business expense. When the marriage was annulled due to fraudulent inducement, that money stayed on my side of the ledger. Step 2. The digital forensics chain. Screenshots aren't enough in 2026. You need metadata. I used a third-party archival tool to timestamp the video I found. This proved I didn't plant the evidence. Step 3. The gray rock method. During the 3 weeks I knew, I became a gray rock. I was boring. I gave short, non-committal answers. This prevented Sarah from sensing my shift and moving her own money or deleting evidence before I was ready. The final verdict. 6 months later, the dust has settled. Sarah lost her primary beauty sponsorship because her brand was built on authentic love. Turns out, sponsors don't like being tagged in cheating groom TikToks. She's currently living with her parents, facing a lawsuit from her own father for the $80,000 he lost on the non-refundable catering. Dave was let go from his firm, not because he slept with a friend's wife, though that didn't help, but because he demonstrated a lack of fiduciary discretion. If he'd talk about a hotel room at a wedding, what would he say about a client's merger at a bar? As for me, I'm currently looking at the sunset over the Pacific. I didn't just save my money, I saved my future. I traded a life of high-stakes lies for a life of radical clarity. The lesson? In 2026, the most powerful thing you can own isn't a house or a car, it's the truth. And if you have the documentation to back it up, you never have to raise your voice to win. If you found that legal maneuver as satisfying as I did, you're exactly where you need to be. In a world where people think they can hide behind a screen or a best friend title, transparency is our greatest weapon. We're building a community of people who don't just get mad, they get documented. 2026 is the year of the high-stakes truth. If you want to be the first to see these tactical breakdowns and masterclasses on human psychology, make sure you're subscribed. We drop a new masterpiece of retaliation every week. If seeing Dave realize his career was over gave you that hit of dopamine you've been looking for, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that this is the kind of justice the world needs to see. I want to hear from you. Have you ever caught someone in a lie because of a digital footprint they forgot they left? Or maybe you have a specific moral dilemma you're currently facing. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and the best story of the week gets turned into our next full-length script.